Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the MEN1 Mosaic podcast. Today I have with me a brand new guest, lovely Holly, who is herself an MEN1 patient who's come on to share about her journey and her experience so far with the MEN1 diagnosis. So welcome, Holly. It's super cool to have you on finally. I know we've had this one pending in the diary for a little while, and obviously you've had your surgery in the meantime, and I'm sure we'll get on to kind of talking about that if that's something you want to share. But it's super cool to have you, so welcome. And I'm going to jump straight in with my first question, which I ask to every single guest. What is your kind of journey or your story so far with MEN1? What have been your experiences? And yeah, anything you'd like to share with listeners?
So in 2022, I went to the doctors just with tiredness, really fatigued. I couldn't, luckily at the time, my son was still having naps, and I had to have a nap because otherwise I just couldn't get through the day. And I feel lucky because at the time they could have just written me off as a tired mum and just left it at that. But they ran some blood tests. It showed that my calcium was high, and it showed that my parahormone was high as well. So they ran the tests again a month later. Both were still high. So I was referred to the endocrine department where I live. Um, and then they did various blood tests. They did various scans, just basic to begin with, a scan on my parathyroid. And then in February 23, I had the radioactive scan. And that all showed that there was one tumour on the left-hand side. So I was on the list for surgery. Surgery is done by ENT where I am, and I just never seemed to hear anything from anyone. I did a lot of chasing. The ENT surgeon that performs parathyroid here was actually off sick. So I saw another ENT, and he told me that I would still be on the other guy's list because he had only done the operation once, so he wouldn't be performing mine, which absolutely is fine by me. And then after a bit more chasing, I found out that I was still on the other guy's list and was like, no, take me off of that list. Like, he can't do that surgery. Like, he's not coming near me. Like, I need to be on the other person's list. So then in August 23, the endocrine did some genetic testing. And I don't know what their prompting was. Actually, I didn't even know what I was being tested for. So I agreed. And then just in November 23, I was told that I do have MEN1. So I was 41 at the time of diagnosis. So I'm quite a late MEN1. And it was a shock. My endocrinologist definitely did not explain to me what it was because I don't think actually he knows what it is. And I know, and I've read, so many other people go through that exact same thing. So, of course, I Googled, which was horrifying, horrifying. And nobody could tell me what it was. And eventually, through a lot of Googling, I found the Amend website, which was amazing. I joined as a person with them, and they sent me out a wonderful welcome pack, which explained so much to me. And then I wasn't so scared anymore. And then I came across you on Instagram. And I even remember messaging you to say, I've learned more from you in 24 hours than I have in the last few months. because the information, of course, on Google is scary. And then it felt a bit more normal. Like there's other people out there. I think especially with such a high, like rare genetic disease, are wondering if you're actually going to find anyone else, because it feels like maybe you wouldn't, but there's plenty of us out there. um so it's been a strange journey. I still haven't had my parathyroid removed. um in April last year, I was taken off of my local ENT surgery list because I asked to be transferred to Imperial in London, because I didn't want an endocrinologist that doesn't know anything about what's going on. And I wanted to be with people that actually know what it is. And I had a clinic appointment with them in June, and it was so amazing to actually be able to talk freely, and they knew what you were talking about, which was incredible. They were just nodding their head, like in agreement with me. They weren't like, "Oh, I better just look on my computer. I don't know what this is." And that was wonderful. Um, And in the meantime, in all of this as well, I'd been complaining about weird stomach pains for over a year with my doctors. And I had the usual, go to the pharmacy. And I just knew that Buscopan wasn't going to fix this problem. I just knew. So I had some um, endoscopy done. I had a CT scan, and the CT scan revealed I had a gist on my stomach, a 4 centimeter gist, and it was on the outside of my stomach. I was referred to Guildford, and in June this year they removed it. It's gone already, which is incredible. And the team at Guildford, I will never not praise that team, because they are incredible. So here I am now waiting for parathyroid. I have 2 Ps. I have pancreas tumours as well. Lots, apparently. The biggest one is 1 centimetre, but as of yet, nothing's happening with that. So yes, that's me in a
Thank you for
nutshell.
sharing. Thank you for sharing, Holly. It's a very relatable story. And I find myself saying that to every guest I have, but each guest's experience in and of itself is so unique. I think some of the things that stood out to me as very common challenges and pain points which MEN1 patients specifically seem to experience is that, those very common symptoms like tiredness and fatigue, which the GP just says, oh, it's stress, or you need to sleep a bit more, and actually, no, it's not. There's something else going on. And when you talked about the chasing that you had to do, and the self-advocacy in terms of making sure that no, it wasn't some generalist surgeon who was operating on you, it really needed to be a specialist. And some of the fear as well that must have come out of that initial, those Google searches. And I consider myself so fortunate that there was an awareness of an MEN1 gene in my family, and I was so young at the time that my parents just got me tested. But obviously the way you came into it must have been so frightening. And I wondered, what are the lessons? I don't even know if lessons is the right word, but what are some of those experiences? What have they taught you about how to approach your healthcare going forwards, if you had one that's kind of really stuck with you, that's really important.
Just through my own research. Like, I'm the type of person that's happy to push, like, for what I know is best for me. And I'm not scared to ask questions, to ask, you know, what about this? Like, is this a better option for me? Because when I first asked to be transferred to Imperial, my endocrinologist actually said no. And I was like, okay. He said, oh, because you're with Guildford, it might get a bit messy with your care. So I was like, okay. And I felt like my surgery's coming up in Guildford anyway. And then literally a week later, the ENT was like, I've requested for you to go to, he said, a hospital in London. And I said, oh, are you sending me to Imperial? And he was like, yes, I am. And he said, you've obviously done your research. And I said, yeah, I'm glad you're sending me there because I want the best care that I can have. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for saving me. But it's worrying that I've read research that says that when people are learning to be endocrinologists, that they very briefly touch on men diseases, and they say you probably won't come across this in your career, which is alarming because there has to be people that actually have that knowledge. Otherwise, how are we going to be helped? How are people going to be helped in the future? Like, what does that research look like in the future? That's my concern.
You make a really valid point there. In fact, a couple of really valid points. And I know from the the conversations that you and I have had since we met, um, you are what I would call like a very proactive patient. And you said before, you're not afraid to ask questions. You're not afraid to push and state that you know what is best for you, and that's a really valuable um quality to have. It's not always easy because
No.
we're navigating through I don't want to say an industry, I don't think that's quite the right word, but healthcare is a very hierarchical system, and sometimes as a patient coming in it can feel as though um in comparison to say a doctor, we don't really know anything, or we don't really know much. How is it that you, when you go into your appointments now, how is it that you make sure that you're heard and that you get your point across and that you have a really good relationship with your healthcare team? Because you said, you feel amazing now to have had your surgery and you respect the team at Guildford. Like, what is it that you've done to make sure that you're in that place?
Mm, I'd just keep it simple. Like, I have a book that I'll just regularly write questions in so I don't miss anything on the appointments. But the Guildford team, the majority of the time, like, I didn't have to ask those questions because they already had answered them in their initial conversation with me, which, is amazing. So I never went away feeling like, oh, I really wish I'd asked that, or why didn't I find out about that? Because I didn't ever need to, because they were just on it all the time. Um, and you could call the nurses as well when, if you were having a day where you were feeling really awful, or you could call and ask for advice, or just chat to them. And they even came and visited me on the ward, which was so lovely because they don't have to do that. And they came to see me afterwards, and that was really lovely. Um, But I just keep note of stuff. Just keep it written down. Just keep it like, so it's just always fresh. Because sometimes I'll probably forget the next day that I wanted to ask that question. So better write it down quickly. And even I think my genetics appointment is actually coming up soon. I've just filled in the forms. So I'm interested to see like what more they can tell me, because we're coming up to a year. So I've learned quite a lot myself. Um, so that would be interesting to see what they've got as well.
That's it. Like you've become a professional patient in a way.
Yeah.
If that doesn't sound like a very odd combination of words, and I don't think it is. I think as patients, it's so important that we become our own professionals, not that we replace, the endocrinologists or, try and convince ourselves that we can do it on our own. It's about becoming such an active member of that team. And as you so kind of rightly say, having the questions, noting it down, being engaged is super duper important. I wondered, outside of your immediate healthcare team, so your doctors and the nurses and all those people who were there, officially to support you, were you able, or have you been able to find much support outside of the kind of professional realm in your personal relationships, friendships, family?
Oh, definitely. Um, like my husband and my family have been amazing, because actually it's a bit of an uncertain time for them because nobody else yet has been tested. So we don't know if there's a line of other people that have it. I could be a de novo, like nobody nobody knows at the minute. Um, so it's yeah, I've had a lot of support, especially when I had my gist removed as well. Like there's, people you learn, don't you? Like who your friends are, I guess. Like who's gonna, give you a hand, who's gonna come and do some washing up for you, or, put a load of washing on for you. Just yeah. It's been it's been crazy like journey in such a short space of time, really. Um and I was when I first had my face-to-face appointment in March with was gastro at my local hospital that actually from the CT scan flagged up the gist, and he said about there was a tumor in my pancreas as well, and I knew eventually that would probably come anyway, so and I could cope with that information. I was like, okay, so there's a tumor on my parathyroid, there's one on my pancreas, but the tumor on my stomach like threw me so much. And I spent like the first half of this year really like on basic functioning, because I was so thrown by what is happening to me. But now that's out of the way, like this half of the year has definitely been much more positive so far. Much more positive. Just knowing that that tumor has gone, and they have already come back to say it was very like, it was less than low risk, like, it was very low risk. So, Guildford have actually already discharged me and said they don't wanna see me again. So that's nice. And sad too, because they didn't get time really to say goodbye to the amazing team there. I was like, "Oh, okay, this is it then. Oh, bye." Hmm.
Well, it's amazing, that, and a testament really to your, I think, attitude, um, that like you've had such a speedy recovery, and you know that you built that relationship with your team and you've come out, and yeah, it's all very uncertain. And you highlighted such an important point which I wanted to draw on, which is like, once you said, you know, once you knew, you could handle the information, but it was the not knowing, and it is the not knowing that's, and the uncertainty that's so scary sometimes. And it is difficult with such a rare condition. There's very little that we know about it, and no one can predict what's going to come. In fact, they can't even predict like patterns, really. They can't show patterns. So it's being able to come to terms with that uncertainty. And I think what you've done, which is surround yourself with an amazing team, and you've got amazing relationships at home, and you research, you educate yourself, is so important. So you really are a kind of a pioneering patient in terms of, you know, hopefully what could be a really positive trajectory going forward. So it's hats off to you, really. I have one final question before we have to close up. If there's one thing you could say back to yourself a year ago when this all blew up and it all first started, or what, like a piece of advice you could give yourself, what would it be?
I'm not sure, because it felt so messy when I first had the diagnosis, just because I had a diagnosis and no information. And like everyone else does, we just get on Google and we just try and find out what we can. And of course, for me, like, it came up straight away, you know, you're going to be dead by the time you're 50. And I was thinking, like, this is like in 8 years' time. Like, what? Like, this, and I was, to begin with, I was so upset because I have a son who's 3.5. And I felt like, you know, what does that mean for him? And we will have him tested as well, because the guilt is massive that, you know, I've unknowingly maybe passed a gene on, and because I didn't know that I had it before he was born, and I've, you know, could have passed it to him as well. And if I have, like, you know, I'll advocate and push for everything and more for him. Um, but I was curious, and I was curious to what was on Google, but I felt like that, you know, that can't be it. Like, that can't just be it. Like, that's your time. Sorry about that. That's the end. Like, it can't, I just felt like there must be more. So I'm really glad that I looked for more information, no matter how scary or horrible it read, because eventually I found the good stuff. And it just took a while to get there. But as soon as I found the good stuff, I felt like, okay, this isn't as bad as my initial Google seems. And I can do this. Like, and it will be okay. I wish, you know, you could look back at your body, like even a few years ago or a few years before that, to see, you know, what it looked like. Because alarmingly, I, when I first had my appointment at Guildford, that gist had actually been there. It was already on a CT scan from 2001. And it was already at a size where they should have already been discussing then about removal. And that discussion obviously never happened. And he looked through all of my CT scans and said, yeah, there's something there. And I asked as well about the pancreas, and he said, yes, it's there. So there's more questions really about why why did that not, appear earlier? But yes, but the gist has gone now. So I feel like, okay, I just need to move on from that. It was there for years, and nobody thought maybe it would be a good idea to look into that further. And the rest of it will just come as it is, I guess. And I just go with it. Just go to hospital, have another operation, but I feel lucky that the team in Imperial is such a great team. And I know that they'll fix me and help me along the way. Yeah.
Well, I know for certain, because I'm under the same team, that Imperial is fantastic and your care will be so well managed. But part of that is, as I said before, because you've stepped up and managed so much of it yourself, and in a way that I find really inspiring, because it is so easy to feel helpless, and then in that helplessness just to let go and say, like, what can I do? But that's, you said, like, there was something inside of you that said this can't be it, like there must be something more, and it's that curiosity, that's brought you to where you are now. And I hope that in watching this back, that listeners can find something gold, like a nugget to take, from your story and your journey. And you've very generously shared and so openly. I'm grateful on behalf of everyone, who's going to listen back to this, because yes, you really are a beacon of inspiration, Holly. So thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed for sharing.
I want people to feel empowered. I want people to feel like, no, I don't think that's right for me.
Mhm.
And not be afraid to ask questions that maybe other people wouldn't. Like, I think that's just my goal in life, actually, that I want people to feel empowered, that if they don't feel something's right, like, just ask the questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask the questions.
Well, in empowering yourself, you are empowering others, and a beautiful job you're doing of it. So thank you, Holly. And I'm excited to stay in touch with you and watch your journey. And as I say, hopefully there'll be many others to come and take inspiration from this episode. So thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.